Hello and welcome to the Mamamade podcast. I am your host, Sophie Barron, and today I'm joined by Liv Purvis. She's not only just a wonderful London-based blogger, but she's mama to Arlo, who's now 1, and she's the founder of the Insecure Girls Club, which is a platform for women to embrace their vulnerabilities and empower themselves through wearing their insecurities on their sleeves. And I love that. And that was really kind of like the theme of this upcoming episode, was working through these kind of psychological things that can crop up when you're introducing solids. A lot of the comparison, a lot of the wondering if I'm doing it right, the worry, the anxiety, and Liv gave such great tips for how to manage it. And on the whole, she's just so reassuring. I felt very calmed after this episode. So let's jump right in. A huge thank you again, Liv, for taking time out of your day to join us here on the Mamamade podcast for a bit of a chat about your own experience weaning your baby boy, Arlo. For anyone who doesn't follow Liv, at Liv Purvis, she's just an amazing blogger. She takes gorgeous photos and a founder of the Insecure Girls Club, which is a space for women to embrace their vulnerabilities and just empower themselves through wearing their own insecurities, which I just love and is something I know I'm personally working on sort of every day. So a huge inspiration to lots of people out there. And I've loved watching you kind of grow into motherhood, watching Arlo grow up. And yeah, just a huge privilege to have you on with us today. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. That's so kind. I was just like, oh my God, this is so lovely. Lucky you haven't got the camera on, otherwise I'd be all embarrassed. But, no, it's an honor to be on here. I was saying just before we started recording that I feel exactly the same about you, like without this being like a back and forth of like, no, you're the best. But I just think like what you're doing with Mamamade is the coolest. Like even I think as soon as we started weaning and discovering Mamamade and how much easier it's made our lives, like I think it's one thing being a parent and it's another thing like working and juggling being a parent, and then it's another thing almost like creating a business that makes other parents' lives easier while being a parent. It's just the coolest thing, and I think you've done a really amazing thing, and taken a lot of guilt out of what can be quite a stressful next stage in parenting basically. But I think you're absolutely amazing as well, so thank you for having me on here.
No, it's really such a privilege, and I think that's really it when it comes to parenting. It's so easy to kind of look at how other people are doing it or feel in yourself like there's kind of a right way or a wrong way. So I really wanted to speak to you particularly about your experience with Arlo, because I think especially when it comes to weaning and introducing solids, a lot of us, particularly women who have that sort of perhaps have been socialized to people please and feel in ourselves there is a right way to do things, and maybe that's something we're all trying to get over. Mealtime can bring a lot of those hang-ups up, I think, especially for me, I will say. And so I know the work that you do kind of on helping people address these feelings. I really was curious to just speak to you about how you felt about weaning and the kind of, let's say, psychological effect it might have had in what you did to kind of navigate it. Maybe we could just start by, what were your expectations of motherhood and before becoming a mother, and then how did they shift after having Arlo? And then just as a sort of part 3, how did they shift kind of around that 6-month mark when you might have started thinking around solids?
I feel like before I feel like parenthood and motherhood in particular, I mean, from my experience anyway, is just the most mind-bending experience in the world. It's almost indescribable. And I know people there's so many cliches that people tell you about, which you kind of go, all right, okay, like it goes so fast, and you're like, yeah, sure. And all of those things are so true, and they're cliches for a reason. But I think before I was a parent, I don't really know what my expectation was. I knew, like, people tell you a lot of things, don't they, before you have a child, and they're like, oh, it's the best thing, it's the hardest thing you'll ever do, but it's most rewarding. And I guess those are perhaps my expectations based on what I'd heard, and I kind of almost tried to go into parenthood like really open-minded. I think, I mean, I did like an NCT class where, you kind of have that very top line, almost education on what parenthood could look like for you in terms of the birth and how to change a nappy. And I mean, I remember just I was like, today actually, in fact, is the day that I went into labour and gave birth, like the next morning. So I'm feeling quite reflective anyway and quite nostalgic, but I feel like those following days in hospital after I gave birth to Arlo, I remember just feeling like, oh my God, I really know nothing. Like even down to like, I think a midwife was saying like, you feed them like every 3 hours. And I was just like, oh, I didn't know that. And I felt really stupid because I guess why would I know that? But there were all these things that I was a bit like, oh yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah. And in a way, this sounds really deep and philosophical to a point, but you're kind of like, you feel like you're being born again because you kind of think, God, like my eyes are just suddenly like wide open to this whole new part of life I had no idea about. And in a way, it's kind of one of those things I don't know, like it sounds horrible to say, but I feel like I have just so much more respect and empathy for parents as well. I mean, not that I didn't before, but I think obviously, like a lot of things in life, until you're in those shoes or in that position, it's very hard to grasp the
Yeah.
experience. And then I think approaching weaning, it was just, I think one of the things I feel about parenthood is it gets easier, but it doesn't. And then everything just changes. And I feel like when weaning approached around 6 months, it was almost like we just kind of figured out a real routine with breastfeeding. And I'd cracked that, which had taken such a long time. And I was like, brilliant, fantastic. And then like kind of what like looked at the calendar or thought, oh wow, Arlo's 6 months next week, and I thought, oh God, it's all going to change again. And I think that's kind of what parenthood is. It's kind of reaching points where you gradually get into a bit of a rhythm and then everything changes again. And I think that's how it's going to be until he's probably about 30. That is just the rhythm of parenthood, where you find your feet and you're like, yeah, cool, I've got this. And then it's like, well, they start school, well, they're moving into their own cot, like it's suddenly like the rug's pulled from your feet again. But I think I perhaps built weaning up to be something, I guess, I guess it's like there's so many aspects of parenthood. I feel like I really built it up in my head as a real, like, not ordeal, that's like quite an extreme word to use, but I think I was very much like, oh my God, we need to get a high chair, we need to get all the like the bowls and the bibs and like all like the NutriBullet or like a blender. And I think I was so overly worried about it because, like with anything, I think it's almost before you give birth, you read lists about the things you'll need, and suddenly you're like, okay, I need 4 different places for them to sleep. I need 500 muslins, and you kind of overread into everything. And then once you get into the groove, you're like, oh, I really didn't need all that stuff. I just, and it is like everything. But I think initially I did find it quite stressful, and as we're approaching him turning 1 tomorrow, I feel like we're also approaching another stage of weaning, perhaps, where I'm like, okay, he should be kind of having more experimental meals and like eating almost a bit more like a grown-up, which is again like more of a societal pressure than anything, because I've spoken to my mum and she's like, God, your brother didn't like his food until he didn't like eating anything until he was about 1 because he was so fussy. And I think everyone just does things at their own pace, but you can't help but feel that pressure to think, okay, now we are hitting the new stage because Sally down the road is doing it that way. But God, yeah, I've really waffled on, I'm so sorry.
No, not at all. I'm like hanging on to every word because I think what you're saying just resonates so much, especially that you really hit the nail on that head with saying you were sort of reborn when you became a mother. And I think about that a lot because I had this feeling when I first had Liba of like, why didn't anybody tell me this is what it was really like? Like, yes. I felt like I had been like dragged through some gutter and no one told me that that's what it was going to be like. And yeah. I think the fact is that once your brain changes, like you actually can't go back into that. I can no longer remember what it felt like before I had a baby in my head. Yeah. And so I actually can't prepare anybody either because my brain has now changed so much. I remember having the change, but I can no longer really put myself in the shoes, if that makes sense. So yeah, I think it is just something that you have to experience to fully appreciate. I mean, did you feel like then that there was, because especially when it comes to like the NCT groups, especially mine, which I felt like was a complete waste of time. Did you feel like when it came to weaning, like there would be a right way and a wrong way? Were you worried about that at all?
I think a little bit. I mean, I kind of ended up following quite a lot of pages on Instagram because I think as a mum in this decade, as a millennial mum, if you like, that's kind of where I get a lot of my information from. So I was like, right, I'll follow some pages. And you're almost kind of not suffocated by information, but you're just a bit like, okay, there's all these different ways of weaning, and it's just a whole new almost education system to kind of like to learn about, because you're just thinking, oh, should I start with baby rice and cereal, or should I start with purees, or should I start with baby led weaning, or what should I do? And then I think you're just overwhelmed by all these things, and then what's best for our baby kind of thing. And I don't know, I think with parenting there's almost these different stages where you're almost like, there's so much more I have to learn now, and you're very much muddling through and learning on the job. But I remember just thinking, I don't really know where to begin. And I think because of that, we ended up buying some like baby rice, and just like expressing some milk to start off with, because I felt like, I was like, I think he's ready. But then I was like, is he ready? Who knows? Like, I mean, it's all very much intuitive, isn't it, with parenting? And we did that, and he seemed to really like it. And then I was just like, okay, we're gonna have to start doing purees. I've not put anything in the freezer. I've not got any ice cube trays. And it's like just this constant, right, ordering the next thing, panicking. And I think it feels like it's so time sensitive, whereas I think with most things it can wait a couple of days, it'll be fine and you'll figure it out and it'll get easier. But I think in my head I was like, I really want him to have all these like fresh purees with, you know, produce grown from our back garden or the finest in the world. And you know, you're already probably perhaps sleep deprived, you're probably not eating super well yourself, which is very much my reality, where we've not had a great sleep pattern. We're kind of fumbling around each day, both working. And then you add on that kind of guilt or pressure to be like, oh my God, I just want the best for him, obviously. But I feel like I can't always do that. So you're kind of reaching for pouches, which like is like completely okay, by the way. And we still do. And I feel like no one should ever feel any shame or right or wrong about how they feed their baby ever. But you're kind of just like, oh, in my head it has to look a certain way, which absolutely doesn't. But obviously social media plays such a part in that, because you know, you see people, you know, preparing things and being like, oh, my baby loved avocado, and you're just like, oh, I've not tried that yet and we're on week 5. And yeah, it's just it's such a minefield. But I think like anything, once you get into the groove, you can start like quietening those external voices, because you're like, oh no, this isn't about anyone else, this is about me and my baby and the pace we're going at. And hey, it doesn't matter if, you know, this baby's having, you know, a full blown like curry with all these amazing flavors, or that baby's just having banana puree still. It's what's relative to you.
That's such a good point of that kind of like learning how to speak kindly to yourself and how to kind of coach yourself through these moments. Because I do agree. I think when it comes to weaning, especially because it's compared to milk, maybe something that's a lot easier for the parent to control, and
Yeah.
it can feel quite competitive in this weird way. I mean, that's basically why I started Mamamade, because I was looking at people. I mean, back in 2018 when Liba was weaning, it was like pinwheels were all the rage. I don't know if they still are, but like everyone was making these things out of like puff pastry. And I'll be on Instagram being like, who has time for this? Like, I'm literally barely keeping my head above water. And meanwhile, you know, I'd go to friends' houses and they'd have like the checklists on the fridge, and you'd see that their baby had plum. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't even remember the last time I've had a plum, let alone my baby had a plum. So it can definitely start to get to you a bit of like, yeah, am I doing this right? I think it is just about learning how to kind of coach yourself through those moments of saying, you know, I'm going at my own pace. I know what's best for my baby, as you say, kind of reminding yourself that your intuition is good. And also that point about timing. So I'm wondering if maybe so we've got the kind of sense of how you felt going into it and your kind of anxieties, maybe just in the earliest days, but if you were to paint a picture of how this process has gone? Arlo's nearly 1. Happy birthday to Arlo. How have you felt, or how has he done, let's say, over the last 6-ish months?
He's 1 tomorrow, which is so surreal, ridiculously so. But you know what? It's been pretty all right. Like I was saying, it's been quite overwhelming, just because I think it just feels like there's so much to think about, and you have all these anxieties and worries, like what he's going to like. Is he going to be allergic to different things? What's he going to be able to eat? Is he going to like, you have those horrible thoughts about like choking and gagging and feeling like it's quite out of your control. And I think I've kind of gone through every kind of anxiety. I mean, I'm a real worrier as it is. So I think that just kind of heightened everything. But actually, touch wood, so far, it's been all right. We started off on purees, just because I was so overwhelmed. I was like, right, we're going to really gently do it. And then gradually started adding in textures and combining things. But I just thought, like, it's very much okay to do it at your own pace, and you don't have to be like super experimental. I think the first thing we gave him was just pureed carrot, and I can't remember if that was from a pouch, if that was from the steamer and then mashed up. I have no idea, and honestly I'm not sure it totally matters. I don't know, that might be blasphemy in the weaning world, but for us I was like, it's just about getting him used to things that aren't my milk. And since then I don't know, we're kind of, as we approach one, he's hitting a stage where it's so nice to see him really take an interest in different things. And although I feel like we're still, I don't know, I don't think it's been the quickest weaning journey. I feel like still there is that kind of like itch on my shoulder that's like, oh, you should be doing this quicker, or he should be having more flavors. And there's that comparison where you're looking at other parents and you're like, oh, like we're still giving him kind of simple meals but his food, and he's kind of enjoying what he's eating. And I think for us that's the main thing, and that's the pace that I'm really happy with. The fact that if we have a meal, we'll try and do a variant of it for him. It's often not the same, but I'm just we're getting there. And I think especially like we're saying with weaning, there's so many different stages. So you kind of go from the purees to like introducing more solids and like things you can hold, to then you're up to 3 meals a day. And I think that at that point for us especially was where Mamamade was a lifesaver, because it's one thing in the morning preparing a little breakfast, and breakfast for us isn't really a super tricky time because we do things like porridge, we do like steamed fruit, or sometimes we'll have like a pureed fruit, even if that's from a pouch, which we'll mix in some porridge or Weetabix or toast. And then at dinner we can kind of we steam lots of things, we do pasta, we do the kind of things that we all have. And I think lunchtime was this kind of real no man's land for us, where we were like, oh my goodness, I have to be creative again at lunchtime. And I kind of felt for a while, I went from like breakfast time, settling him down for a nap, him waking up, playing with him, and then it was lunchtime. And I was like, how am I supposed to have cooked like you were saying, like a pinwheel or some fresh muffins in time for lunch, because I haven't even got dressed? And it's kind of like everything rolls around so quickly that suddenly you're like, oh my goodness, I literally haven't even thought about it. So discovering Mamamade at that point for us was just a lifesaver, because I was like, oh my goodness, I can put something in the microwave or the oven or however, and he's got another nice meal. And I don't feel like I've cheated. I don't feel completely terrible. And then I feel like I've really like smashed it.
Oh, I'm so pleased.
Oh no, I think for us that was the real like big gap in our day, because we were just being like, oh, maybe we'll give him some toast, or maybe I don't know. And then suddenly you're just scraping the barrel, because I think my lunches especially are not exciting. Like I'm a Heinz tomato soup person, or a cheese sandwich, and just different things that at the time we couldn't give him. I mean, I've not given him Heinz tomato soup yet, but I'm sure it will come. It was just that panic that I was like, I'm not being creative enough. And we have so many cookbooks, like baby cookbooks, that you buy as you hit this stage, and they have all these gorgeous ideas. And then part of me was like, hang on, when am I doing this? Like what time have I got? Like, especially if you're working, even if you're not working, like you're spending so much time kind of playing with your children or simulating them or taking them to classes or baby play dates, or you're kind of thinking, oh my God, when am I able to do this? Or doing washing, or just the list goes on and on and on. So I feel like I've gone totally off the question here. You were talking about the weaning journey, and I've literally given you a story of Arlo's food life.
No, I love hearing it. And I think what I love hearing really the most is kind of those times when you've kind of spoken to yourself and kind of pulled yourself back from what might have been a sort of unhelpful thought, let's say, or like something that just sort of, isn't serving you really. And I guess what advice might you have for somebody who's not finding it as easy, or maybe you're making it seem easier than it sounds, of sort of pulling yourself back? Really easy to kind of see what everybody else is doing and feel that pressure to do it right, and to have that sort of perfect mealtime 3 times a day, and the snack, and everything quite right. And I'm seeing it now, even for example, like, so my son Arthur is just a month older than Arlo, and he happens to be walking, and I have friends with babies the same age who I can see their own sort of eyes get a bit insecure when they find out he's walking, as if it's some like race to the finish, as if it's not, you know, every baby different. And yeah, sort of how do you recommend people pull themselves back from, I guess, like the brink, if they feel themselves kind of going off that, let's continue the metaphor, off that cliff of insecurity and comparison?
I mean, I'm exactly the same. And I think we all have insecurities or comparisons when it comes to children. It's so hard not to, because I think like I never want to compare, but I feel like even at the moment, the other day I was saying to my husband, I was like, I felt like a pang of guilt for not putting Arlo in nursery yet, because we both work at home. We're very lucky we have family close by and we can kind of work it out at the moment. But then I was like, oh my God, am I stopping him from socializing and all these other things? And I feel like no matter where you are in parenting, or no matter how you're doing it, there's always going to be that guilt. There's always going to be the comparison. Like, I guess there might be parents whose children are in nursery who will be looking at parents who can be at home with their children thinking, oh, I wish I could be like it. You know, everyone is feeling it. And I think I try to remind myself that I'm the best mum for Arlo. Like, we're all the best parents for our children, and we're all doing the best we can in the situation that we're in. And, you know, if you're having one of those days which has been really difficult, and, you know, you're not dressed, the washing is coming out of your ears, the house is a tip, you are doing the best you can do in that day. And whether that means popping something in the microwave, using a pouch, doing whatever, like, you've done it, you know. And I think it's trying to remember that. And I think, yeah, like you said, I think one thing I've learned, especially from having a really generous Instagram community, is whenever I've spoken about different parenting worries or points in parenting that I've come to, I'm like a bit of a fork in the road, every response I have is so different, is so varied, which just reminds me that everyone's journey is so different. And I find so much comfort in that, because, you know, Arlo's 1 tomorrow. He's barely got 2 teeth. They're still coming up. And for a while I was like, oh my God, he's got no teeth. Like, well, some kids have got like 12 teeth at this point, or maybe not 12 teeth, but like, you know, I was like, oh God. And that didn't really bother me until I was, you know, worrying about other children, which I really shouldn't do. And it kind of just reminded, and like some people are like, oh, my kid didn't get their first teeth until they were 14 months. And I just think everyone does it every child does things at their own pace, whether that's weaning, whether that's walking, whether that's getting their teeth, whether that's growing a full head of hair. Like, everything will come when it's ready. And I think that's something I just try and always remind myself. You know, it's like anything in life, like we'll all get to the point that we'll get to when we're ready to get there. And I just think, like, that's all you can do, and all you can do is your best. And it's very hard, because social media does make it so easy to look at what every other parent is doing, but every other parent is possibly comparing as well. So we can just all keep on looking at each other until we're all blue in the face, but it doesn't change much. But I just think so often there's like mums in my NCT group I'll look at and I'll be like, oh my God, they're all smashing it, and I feel really like all over the shop. And I'm sure they're looking at people thinking they're smashed. And it's just, I mean, as well, like, obviously social media is such a highlight reel. Like, you're only seeing often the times where someone has prepared a really great meal or a really cool recipe, but you don't always see the days that people have gone, oh, okay, like, I'm really disorganized and I haven't got anything in the fridge, and oh God, I need to run to the co-op and just get some broccoli so I can throw it in the steamer or something, because I'm just not with it. And even then, to be saying that out loud, I'm like, oh, steaming broccoli, that is on it. So it's all so relative. It's all so relative. And I just think, like, parenting is hard work, and it's a full-time job. And I think if you're doing it, you're doing a great job. And I just really try and remind myself of that. And I think if you are in a real dip or a real slump, it's so worth talking to people around you about how you're feeling, because, like, so often people just want to help you out. Talk to other parents, talk to like your family or those closest to you, and just say how you're feeling, because they will be there to just go, you are doing a great job, because you will be doing a great job even if you don't feel like you are. And I think it's about having that wider context. Like, you can compare yourself until the cows come home, but the people around you who know you the best will be able to tell you that actually what is most important is the job you're doing, which no one else can do, and you're doing amazingly.
I love that. No, I think that's just so spot on. Like, it doesn't ever go away. Weaning is like one episode of
Yeah.
one episode of being an insecure parent. And I see it now, even Leva being at school, you know, I'm not there at every pickup, and every other mother seems so put together in the morning. And I'm always, you know, my car is filthy and has, you know, food in it from who knows how long ago, and their cars are pristine. You know, there's always a source of
Yeah. Oh my
insecurity, no matter
God.
who you are and what you're doing.
But look at you.
And
Your Mamamade Sophie. Oh my God. You're like, you run an incredible business. I bet some people are like, oh my God, like she's running a business and parenting. What? How does she do it?
If they only saw the state of my car, but
they'd be like, she got in the car. She managed.
Yeah.
She uses the car.
And I think also what you said, you know, it's remembering that everybody's feeling the same way. And I have definitely found that the people who are sort of most vocal about doing things the quote unquote right way are actually usually the people who are looking the most for someone to say, like, you're doing a great job. It's like everyone wants to get that feedback, and it's hard to get that feedback when you're a mom. It's hard to know that you're doing things right and you're doing a good job, and sometimes that is just what people need to hear. I mean, to some extent, I guess you have to get comfortable with not hearing it, but
Yeah,
I think it's also okay to look at a friend who's maybe, you know, and see that as an opportunity to say, wow, like, I think you're amazing for doing that. And it doesn't necessarily cost you anything, even though it might feel maybe difficult to say, but actually you can make someone's day by just saying that something small.
Completely. And I also think that, yeah, what might be right for one family won't necessarily be right for yours. And I do think it's always worth carrying that as well, to know that, you know, what might be right for your best friend who's a parent won't necessarily work for your family. And that's not a bad thing. That's just parenting, and that's children, and that's, you know, everyone approaches things differently. And I think that's another nice thing, is that there are so many multiple ways of the right way. But exactly like you say, like, actually I think telling people they're doing a great job when you observe it is the most amazing thing. And yeah, like you said, it costs nothing. It really doesn't. And I think when you're in a bit of a slump, it can be difficult to kind of, you know, look at someone else doing a great job and go, hey, you're really smashing it. But it won't make you feel any worse. It really won't.
And sometimes it actually helps you feel a bit better, because then you sort of strike up a different kind of rapport with the other person. And
Exactly. And you don't feel like you're competing, because I think, yeah, like you say, like there isn't like a finish line for like babies that, you know, are eating a full spectrum of foods and have full, like, all their teeth and are running by the time they're 14 months. It's kind of very gradual, and there isn't like a certain cut-off point. So it's actually quite cool to be like, hey, we're not in competition, and actually you're smashing it, and I really admire the way you're doing things.
I love that. That feels like such a good line to end on. I've just loved speaking to you. I think anybody who's been listening in who doesn't know you already will just appreciate how calming you are, how lovely you are, and your content on socials in particular. Yeah, they give the same vibe. It just feels like such a lovely kind of escape to be in your world. So where can people follow you if they're not already?
Oh, so if you're not already following me, you can follow me on Instagram, which is @livepurvis, and I write a blog as well, which is called What Olivia Did. So that's www.whatoliviadid.com. And as Sophie kindly mentioned at the beginning, I also run a separate platform called the Insecure Girls Club, which has an Instagram account, which is @the Insecure Girls Club, and also a website which has lots of contributions from brilliant women talking about everything, everything like friendships, love, relationships, work, parenting, just the lot. So they are the main places you can find me. You can also find me down by my washing machine 24/7, because that is the only place I ever seem to be at the moment. But yeah.
Well, thank you so much again, Liv. I know you've got a lot on your plate just from that little introduction. And yeah, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to have a chat. It's just been so great to hear your perspective on things. And I think it's just a great reminder to just focus on ourselves and, yeah, not worry about what other people are doing. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. It's been such a lovely chat, and I feel like I can take on lunchtime now successfully.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today. That's it for this episode of the Mamamade podcast. We'll be back soon with even more episodes about parenting in the modern world, about weaning, about anything you guys want to hear about. So please send us your questions, send us your comments, send us your parenting wins, and of course, be sure to follow us at Hello Mamamade. You can follow me at Sophie M. Barron, and you can follow Liv Purvis at Liv Purvis. So just remember that we're always here for you. We've been where you are, we are where you are, and we're here to share the load and share the love.